Hi, I'm Sammy Leslie. I'm here in the wonderful Castle Leslie estate. I'm very confused by my many job titles because I do so many different things, but I think the one that sits most comfortably is custodian, because I'm a short link in a long chain. We don't actually own anything. In reality, we don't own any part of this planet, and for us it's how do we look after the best and pass it on in the best condition we can. Castle Leslie Estate is very much known for our hospitality, for staying in the castle, for events, for coming to stay in the lodge, to eat, come to the spa, go to the equestrian. I'm 3 years here, and my main role is in a tiny little company called Innovation and Projects. I have a garden shed in my back garden and a cat, and that's where we say the brilliant ideas are born. You know, it's how do we take a thought, an idea, and nurture it to a point where actually it's something meaningful and will actually add value and make a difference. We build a lot of glass walls around ourselves to say that we can't do this and we can't do that, but in that free thinking space, anything is possible. And then you come into the real world and you go, okay, well, now how do I make it possible? How do I make it happen? If it's something that's of value and going to add to the overall experience and the many layers that make up the magic of Castle Leslie. Our own records go back about 1,000 years to a young man who was a mercenary who protected Margaret, Queen of Scots, and then married her sister-in-law, and eventually over the years came over here as a fighting bishop who detested Cromwell and raised a private army against him, and then ended up buying the estate here in 1664. And we still have the original purchase deeds, which sort of fold out for miles, and the descriptors are wonderful because you get the rabbits and the hares and the deer and everything that was. I don't know how you count it. I don't know how you put that on a balance sheet these days, but so been here since the sort of 1600s. My grandmother was American, Marjorie Clay Ide, and her father worked for Taft and Roosevelt. Her 21st was in the White House. Mine was in the local Chinese. I probably had more fun. And her mother passed away and her sister died of typhoid, and they were heartbroken. So her father took overseas postings, and he went to the Philippines as Minister for Finance, ended up Governor General, and then Chief Justice Governor General in Samoa. So Granny grew up in the South Islands. And as Minister of Finance, of course, he taught his daughters how to read accounts. And years later, when she ends up marrying my grandfather, moving back to Ireland, we had quite a lot of upland in Donegal bogs and mountains, and there was annual meetings, and they went through the accounts, and Granny asked to sit in on the meeting, and she did, and then the next year they went through the accounts again, and she kept looking at the balance sheet going, I'm not quite right here. So she asked for the balance sheet for the couple of years before, the accounts for the years before, and she went through the balance sheets and she went, 22,000 sheep on the land, X year, 22.5 this year, 21 the year before. She said, what is happening? Don't the sheep breed? And of course, it turned out that one of the agents had been selling off the lambs, and as long as the numbers were steady in the balance sheets, nobody questioned. And he went to jail. Nobody expected a woman to be able to read a set of accounts in those days, and I don't think the men could anyway. So yes, as long as it was presented in a way that everything looked stable, it was all fine. But yeah. When I came home in the early 90s, it was still, we were right on the border, the Troubles were still going strong, and I wanted to open a little tea rooms. I didn't have any cash. I got a grant for £5,000 from the County Enterprise Board, and I sold my father's car to match the 5,000. He wasn't in the country, and don't ask about the logbook. And that started it. It was a handful of fabulous young teenage girls from the village and a very talented baker, and that's where we started. And I can remember doing the till on a Sunday night, and we had taken £1,000, which was like, oh my God, how did that happen? And that was a lot of afternoon teas, a lot of scones, a lot of tours, a lot of spots of jams. And then we thought, actually, we might be able to do something and keep it going and make a crack at it. In the time I was away, I had got to Switzerland to train hotel management. So we managed to open 6 bedrooms on the main floor. Couldn't touch the top floor because it leaked too much, too many buckets. And started again with some support from Fulch Ireland. Got the main roof done. Got some more bedrooms restored. At that point we had 14 bedrooms, and the restaurant was sort of 2-3 nights a week. And then we got incredibly lucky. Paul McCartney chose here as the venue for his wedding. That was a huge game changer. I think one of the things that also makes the estate unusual is that there's actually 8 different faiths in the family, or belief systems, and probably as many nationalities. So we definitely see things from lots of different viewpoints. On the American side of the family, there's part Iroquois, and we look at what happened to Indigenous people in the Americas. There's a lot of very sad stories. My stepmother was Hungarian German Jews who fled Berlin. They got out in 39 by the skin of their teeth, and a lot of their family didn't get out. That understanding of how desperately cruel human beings can be to each other, I think never fails to shock me. So for us, it's how do we build a fairer, kinder, more inclusive, open world. And so for us, diversity, inclusion, equality and equity are embedded in everything that we do. And that's just part of the heart and soul of who we are. So in everything that we do, in every project, every area, we've tried to find the best sort of benchmarking, whether it's in Ireland or international or global. And for hospitality, we looked at the Global Council for Sustainable Tourism, and the one that fitted with us the best, a thing called the Long Run. So their top standard is at that level, and it's around what they call the 4 C's. So how do we look after, and in no particular order because it always flexes, how do we look after climate? What do we do in terms of community? How do we make sure culture is protected? And while it's all commercially viable, there's commerce as well. It has to be viable and stand on its own 2 feet. And it's a wonderful blend of looking at all 4. So at the moment we're moving up through the ranks. It's probably a 5-year process to get to the top of it, and it just means that everything that we do in terms of respect for our planet and sustainability is embedded, but also in a way that is truly sustainable. So we got introduced to Tony by Sharon Scallion Amory, who was our lawyer at the time, and she had worked with him, and that's how it all started. It was, like many, it was a personal introduction, and that's what I love working with him, because we've always got access to Tony. He's an amazing team, and we work with lots of different people on different things, but when it comes to that overview piece where we need to look at how all the different pieces fit together, and when it comes to doing strategy work, Tony's very much there, absolutely. And for us working with Azets, it's great because it doesn't matter what I throw at Tony and how airbrained it might seem at the beginning. We hammer things out and work through it and go, there is a nugget in here, and how do we build a strong, robust structure around it? How do we build a business case? How do we fund it? How do we fundraise? How do we manage it? And all the time making sure we're fully compliant, because that's an absolute, it has to be 100% compliant in whatever project or structure we're working in. Working with an accounts firm is always fascinating because so many people obviously in that world are very linear, logical thinkers, and they need to be because that's the skill that they need to bring. But I think that's what's great about Azets, because they get the sort of madness and complexity of an estate and the sort of diversity in thinking and looking at things differently, because places like this are just very different. You know, they're large and complicated, living, breathing organisms that nothing ever stands still and everything's always fluxing and flowing. Client focused. And one of the fun things has been sitting down going, yeah, can we do a 100-year plan? And for a lot of people, 100 years is a very long way away. When you live and work somewhere here where you're looking at, you know, the chestnut tree beside the lodge that's 350 years old that somebody planted there for a purpose. You know, you have these very in hospitality of immediates. I want a cup of tea, I want it in 5 minutes. And what we're looking at doing, and in a lot of areas will have impacts, you know, 5, 10, 15, 20, 100, 150 years, especially around the work and environment and with the land and the years. So that flexing from, you know, urgent and imminent to very long-term thinking is a great space to work in, and Tony certainly gets it. In that plan, we were brought up with a very simple mantra: all you can do is the best with what you have and by those around you. And what we've done is looked at all of the different moving parts and layers on the estate. We've done research right back to when Giaterra broke up and actually Ireland formed as a land mass, and we're actually two continents, bits of two continents fused together, sort of right the way through to look at that longevity, to really understand the landscape and the land that we have, and then layering on all the sort of social and human layers on top of it. And that's sort of been the foundation of the plan. It's also looking at where we're going and some of the sort of bigger issues that we have around human health, and that's both mental and physical health, because without your health, wealth, it doesn't really mean very much. Nobody can buy another day on this planet. So we're looking at the areas on how we can work with horses and movement and nature for children with needs, and also has huge impacts on people with PTSD. It's shown massive research on impacts with things like domestic violence. So that's one big project. We're looking at the walled garden and how we restore that, but not just restore it, how do we tell the story? How do we help people give people the tools to make better decisions around their own health? And that's just part of the heart and soul of who we are.